Well, as we're now aware, the Southeast Field Days is now an inclusive event and non-segregatory on the basis of vaccination. With me is Nick McBride, who is the current member for McKillop, but facing the election as a candidate at this Saturday's election. And he's faced some criticism about a lack of action to get the Field Days to be inclusive up to now. We welcome him to the program. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hello, Wayne. I'm well, thank you.
Good. Well, the York Peninsula Field Days back 6 months ago were an open event and there wasn't any mandatory vaccination requirement on those field days. Should the Southeast Field Days have been given a similar COVID plan?
First of all, with what happened at the York Peninsula, my understanding is they were very limited in the numbers that they could have at the field days. And if that's the case about the vaccination status, that may have been an opportunity back then. What happened with the Lucindale Field Days working right up to this date of the March the 19th, which is and 18th and 19th, this Friday and Saturday, was that the committee obviously were working through all what was COVID through November, December, January, and they've landed in the best and most easiest possible position that they could. I haven't told them what to do. I haven't been part of that process to say where their best opportunities lie. What I have done, though, is that when it got hard and difficult for them, and they've had a couple of extraordinary meetings with the Lucindale Lions committee as well as the Lucindale Lions members, which I'm a part of and a member, and I've helped them with this process with direct contact with Department and Premier and Cabinet, which then has worked with SA Health to make sure these field days went ahead. Now, I know that they were trying to do this sort of negotiations through December and January, and we had all sorts of things roll out after Christmas, New Year with the Omicron variant, and a lot of COVID out and around the southeast, the Limestone Coast, as a result of Christmas and New Year celebrations. And look, it all really got quite difficult. But what I was pleased to have to say here, Wayne, is that the committee worked through this with SA Health, not with me, and through my contacts with the Department and Premier and Cabinet, to actually have an event work through and had say that the Lucindale Field Days were going to take place. And with that, they obviously had at least, I think, 2 crisis meetings where they thought these might be all too hard. And we've managed to get there. And now everyone I talk to, this is the exhibitors, this is the public, this is the Limestone Coast residents, the farmers, the business sectors, are really, really happy that the field days are going ahead. And now I know it was a vaccinated event and they need to be double vaccinated to actually get people to come in as of yesterday. And then that's now changed. And I'm very pleasantly surprised that it is. And I think the committee is also very, very pleased that it has. And they are very, very glad that they had got this far and that it's got also easier for everyone to attend.
Right. So do you support the Liberal government, its COVID health plan that it did put up for the Southeast Field Days, given that it is very onerous in nature with the mandatory vaccination component, and it has resulted in what we understand to be significant exhibitor losses, also many locals complaining that they would be locked out of their own agricultural event that they've attended for 30 years, and they've said that they've felt like there has been a very strong movement within the community of people that are disappointed with the way in which the Field Days was organised as a mandatory vax-only event.
So, Wayne, the first point, or the last point, but addressing this first, this was the easiest and, let's say, accessible way of making sure the field days took place at all. Secondly, I'm a big advocate and in favour of the voluntary choice of being a vaccinate or not in the community through this COVID pandemic. I'm not in favour of this compulsory vaccine type process, and I believe in freedom of choice. And you'll hear that, and you would have noticed over the last 4 years I'm a big advocate of freedom of choices. As for people being not allowed to come because they weren't vaccinated, that's not a rule that I, developed, nor do I think that it works that well. And yes, I see it very, very divisively throughout our community. However, we have been through a pandemic, and I'm trying to work with the processes that are in place without any power or traction into SA Health with these decisions that are being made at that level. And I have been a member of McKillop, like I am, and advocated for those that have been ostracised and could not or would not take the vaccine because of their reasons and rationale.
I just want to bring you to the point, though. Had you then, with the complaints that you were receiving, which you clearly have indicated there, had any of those complaints, did you take them to SA Health? Is there, on any occasion, have you written to SA SA Health as the member, complaining of the nature of the mandatory vaccination. You say that you are for people to have their own voluntary position. So did you field those complaints, and did you at some point seek SA Health to intervene and change the status of the event?
We had a number of constituents come to us. The first people or cohort that we had were the health workers. We had cooks, cleaners, carers and nurses come to us, and I did advocate to SA Health, I believe in a written form, to obviously state their position that they're going to lose their jobs, and I can't remember what the reply was now, but I know that we did go and bat for those people, Wayne, and I continue to do so because I didn't like seeing two things. I didn't like seeing them lose their jobs, and secondly, I knew how hard it was for the aged care facilities and health precincts to be able to find replacements for these people that could no longer turn up for work because they were opting out of the vaccine program. So for me, it didn't work, but I had to work with the rules that were in place, and we did go and bat as hard as we possibly could, but we didn't get anywhere.
Okay, you say you didn't get anywhere, but on the basis of the field days, not the health workers and that's a separate issue, but the field days, the complaints that you were fielding from locals and from exhibitors, did you at any time write to the SA Health about those complaints, seeking that the mandatory conditions be removed?
In regards to the field days, the decisions and where they've landed to get the field days to where we are today, I did not pursue those complaints if we did receive any. Like we got a letter from yourself and the Flow FM. We did not send that on to SA Health because we left it with the committee to work through this process to make sure that the field days took place.
Okay. Were you aware that there was an event held which was a non-vaccination event in Adelaide, outside the Adelaide Oval in February, where 8,000 people were allowed to come to an event where there was no vaccination required? So given that information, do you think maybe you failed those people who've complained about the fact that they weren't able to attend their own field days? Do you think that given more information, you might have perhaps been more strident about advocating for their interests?
Okay then, and let me respond to this. The whole 2 years of these COVID rules and restrictions, we have seen a lot of inconsistencies. The border closures, the education outcomes, the health outcomes, and alike have been really troublesome for people that have found themselves on the wrong side of a line, whether it be a rule or a restriction. And we have gone out and about, up and above most other electorates altogether, to advocate for these people as best we could. We had to work with the systems in place, Wayne. We did what we could, and we did receive some favourable outcomes, but most times we didn't get far with the type of restrictions we're in. The event you're talking about in Adelaide, I don't know the correlation between that and the Lucendale field days, recognising the field days have massive marquees, indoor areas and alike, and I don't know why that would make it a different type of event to what occurred in Adelaide. One of the things we did see was massive inconsistencies across the state, and it certainly did frustrate the Limestone Coast residents as well as the people in Mackillop, and we've done our best to try and make sure that they got the best representation they could.
Do you then not agree with your own government, the Marshall-level government's health position on the field days and the mandatory vaccination? Do you personally don't agree with it?
No, I won't say that. I think that the way that the Field Day Committee worked through this process, I think the way our government has got to managing COVID over the last 2 years, in generally, for an economy and the people, it has been outstanding. Yes, we've seen some massive flaws. Yes, we've seen some massive problems that have certainly caught our office, our residents, our cross-border communities have really suffered through some of these rules and restrictions. We've gone out as much as we possibly can to back them, support them and try to help them, and mostly we were unsuccessful. However, I'm not going to be critical of what was in the last 2 years. All I can say is we do need to look forward now. We've got an event that's Lucendale Field Days. We can have 40-odd thousand people over 2 days like it has been in the past. That's a 15,000 on a Friday, 25,000 people on a Saturday. They're the sort of records that have been achieved in the past. I doubt whether we're going to see those sort of numbers this year, only because people are still wary. We're all getting back into the normal life of what we normally would expect after this pandemic, and it's still occurring. So I don't think we're going to break those sort of records at these field days, but I'm really, really pleased.
Given that there could be losses for the Field Days Committee directly caused by the mandatory nature of vaccination that were imposed on them by the state government, the Liberal government. So do you think on that basis that would you be advocating for a grant or something of that nature, given if the exhibitor losses are significant, which we understand them to be, and there could be hardship as a result, would you advocate for a financial recompense for the South East Field Days?
Let's just see what happens, Wayne, in this spot. Let's see how these field days transpire. I believe it should be and could be a great success. And making a single dollar worth of profit and more will be a great outcome, bearing in mind the last field days they tried to do, which they cancelled at nearly the last minute, cost them substantial monies. And they did receive some federal help. I don't know what they received in state help, but I'm hoping that these field days do work for them. I hope it actually then makes paves the way for a 2023 field days, and we see it, replicate what it used to do. And the sort of funds that this field days brings is nearly over $600,000 just in the way of volunteer organisations, and not just Lions Club, but all the volunteer organisations that are anything to do with the field days. And it's a real boost to not only just Lucindale, but the whole of the region, accommodation, businesses and the like. So the other word I'm hearing is that, it's nearly $60 to $80 million worth to the economy in sales and business agreements and businesses being able to sell their wares. So these are really, really valuable field days, and I'm hoping that they do prosper. And if the government needs to help out and assist in this area, I'll be out there trying to make sure that if that's the requirement to make sure the field days occurs in 2023, I'll be batting for them.
Are you angry with Stephen Marshall and the Liberal government about this, Nick? Given that the risk factor here was that if we didn't get this last-minute reprieve on the numbers of people, we understand that there could be up to 20, maybe even 30% of people were not planning to attend because of the mandatory vaccination requirement. If that were to be the case, are you angry with your own government over this policy?
No, I'm not angry. Look, the process and the policies that they've been working with have been consistent over the last 2 years. I'd have to say that they've done a magnificent job protecting Adelaide and the general South Australian economy. Yes, I've probably been frustrated with some of the regional restrictions that we've suffered, and perhaps that sometimes we feel like we're on the other end of the stick. I think there's no point being angry. I just want to and have been able to work with the Liberal government more than ever with my connections into the Department of Premier and Cabinet, and I did help the Lucindale Field Days again along that lines. And I think that this whole Field Days is going to be a success. That one, it's occurring, and secondly, they're back into it again, hopefully working towards more prosperous Field Days in the future. And that's the only way we can look at this.
The question of health, and in your last interview here with Ricky Lambert on Flow News 24, you indicated that your own government was not successful in securing funding for our local hospitals in McKillop, but like Keith and Narracourt. Yet the ALP has promised a massive funding amount for the South East, and you're on the record in that interview as stating that you'd support it and that you would hold them to account if they were elected. Do you believe that you've failed in your role in not being able to attract those funds that now the ALP is promising?
Two-tiered question. One is that the Liberal government have rolled out $1.5 million towards the Keith Hospital over the last 2 years, including this year. They've got a project officer in place to work through a new model for the Keith Hospital. My understanding is I'm not sure what the funding model is looking like, but Labor have offered another $1.5 million to keep the hospital going for the next 7 years on that type of budget. It would be, let's say, advantageous to see that hospital be able to operate with those sort of funds. I think our Liberal government are probably nearly on the same page, but not quite. I don't know what it means when you've got $1.5 million and you still have a private hospital that doesn't meet the public needs. It only meets those with private healthcare, which we know is restricted. Coming back to the Narracourt Hospital, I really was pleased to see the Labor government advocating nearly $8 million for the Narracourt Hospital. We have done up the emergency department and also the quarantine or the disinfectant type areas in the hospital for hygiene and cleanliness there. There's been and at least many millions of dollars there spent there. I can't just tell you what the figures are, Wayne. Certainly, the hospital is an old hospital. It does need further upgrades. I'm just really pleasantly surprised and will support and back the Labor Party, coming to the party and making sure that this hospital does receive those funds in the future if they were to form government. That's why I supported that type of process, and I'd like to see it if they don't get in, and we are still in government, Wayne, that our government recognises, well, if Labor can do this, why aren't we?
That would require a strong advocate for McKillop to bring that about. Remembering that you are in government now and you haven't been able to deliver in the first 4 years, it's likely that, given the polls, Labor look like they may actually beat the Liberals in South Australia and you'd be a one-term government. On that basis, do you support Stephen Marshall as the leader of the Liberal Party?
He's the Premier. He's led us for the last 4 years. He believes he has this in hand. I'm going to watch and see. Look, my intel thinks I believe it's going to be close. I'm fingers crossed that he is lucky enough to form government in some shape or fashion, and we can prove that the next 4 years are even better than the last 4 years. Bearing in mind we have just been through 2 years of a pandemic as well.
Would you cross the floor and maybe even become an independent in McKillop if you were to win the seat in front of the Nationals and the Labor candidates, both of whom have given strong presentations also on this station? Would you maybe seek to go independent so that you can better serve the needs of the people of McKillop? Maybe even when we go back to the field days and the circumstances of how that's been handled and how we've lost potentially 30, maybe 40% of exhibitors. Could you better serve the people of McKillop as an independent?
Look, one of the things that was really quite highlighted to me very early on in my political career in 2017 is that they thought that McKillop's a safe Liberal seat, will be taken for granted and we will not be considered. Well, I've already proved myself on at least 4 occasions by crossing the floor for regional South Australia and on a number of topics, either the COVID Emergency Act plus the mining bill. And I will continue to bat for the McKillop electorate and regional South Australia more than ever. I'm certainly a Liberal member. I want to be part of a Liberal government. I want to make sure this Liberal government that we form in the next 55th Parliament actually acts and behaves like a Liberal government, and I'll do everything in my endeavours to see that occur, and I'll continue to speak out so long as I can bat for the regions of South Australia, including McKillop.
And so you are saying that behaves as a Liberal government. The next one, are you saying that this last Liberal government hasn't behaved as a Liberal government, Nick? I mean, we see the Vicky Chapman legislation on life, on full-term abortion, on euthanasia. I note that you supported those bills. So do you think that maybe the old-fashioned values of the Liberals have been lost and people even like yourself have moved on and perhaps don't support some of those older-fashioned Liberal values?
So they're talking about the abortion bill, and look, that has a number of intricacies around it being protecting life, and it's only in absolute dire circumstances that any full-time abortion needs to take place. But as I've already said to you, Wayne, I'm a believer in freedom of choice. And we've got 2 medical practitioners needing to back up any type of abortion beyond 23 weeks, which is a very good policy of protection. The other point you come out is, Liberal values and morals. I just think we need to make sure that the Liberal government represents regional South Australia more than ever. And I think this is an area that needs to be still considered more than what we've already done. I think that the regions are going to play a massive role in building the economy and all our economic benefits the state should be reaping. And I'll be making sure that any new Liberal government actually has the regions first and foremost, and that's where I'm going to be sticking to.
So the current circumstances and the situation of the regions is that they haven't fared well under the Marshall government when there was so much publicity when the Marshall government was coming into the electorate after 16 years of Labor. There is a feeling amongst those in the regions and a disquiet that the Liberals didn't deliver for the regions like they said they would. Is there a better option, an independent option that maybe should be considered at this state election, given the failure in 4 years for the Liberals to deliver for the regions?
Yeah, so Wayne, I wouldn't call it a failure for the regions under the Liberal Marshall government. I just say that there's a lot more to do. I probably would have to say that I think the Liberal Marshall government has delivered for the regions more than what Labor did in its last term or the 4 terms, 16 years of Labor government. I think the regions have done better under the Marshall Liberal government. But when you've got to try and fix up that 16 years of neglect and population decline, infrastructure's got older. Look, it doesn't, and it was going to happen in one term. And I think this is why we deserve another go. I think that's why I think there's more to be done. And I think that with that in play, with that sort of recognition by the Liberal Party, that it can only be a good thing for the regions if that is allowed to continue, and Stephen Marshall and the Liberal government can continue to build the regions like it needs to, and be represented to make sure that the monies do keep flowing that way.
It's good to have Nick McBride. He is the member for McKillop facing an election this Saturday. He's been very candid and coming on to answer some tough questions here on our morning show that we've put to him, and we do thank him for his time, and we do wish you and everyone at Lucendale this weekend, Nick, a really, really good time. Hopefully you are right that there will be big crowds and good numbers to bring some money in to support the Lions Club there, and likewise that the exhibitors that have missed out, you'll be able to pick them back up in the future. And I thank you for coming on and talking to us today.
As always, Wayne, a pleasure.